Chapter 6. The shifting patterns of hyperspace swirled outside the Grey Shrike's bridge, a hypnotic spectacle that never failed to amaze or intimidate first-time viewers. Lakinda hardly noticed. With no shipboard duties currently vying for her attention, her full focus was on how Aralani's almost offhanded order was going to affect her life. On the surface, of course, there would be no effect. Her admiral had detached one of her ship captains from the attack force in order to contact her other ship captain. All perfectly proper, reasonable, and necessary. No one on Chilla would blink twice over the order or Lakinda's obedience to it. But that was on Chilla. On Chioral, stronghold of the Sodlak family, it would be a different story. Honor and glory to the family. That was the Sodlak watchword these days. Not just a slogan, but the single most important goal for all who called themselves by the Sodlak name. And Lakinda had now failed, twice in a row, to earn that glory. She felt a knot in her stomach. The first blow had been at their last skirmish with the Nikardan, where untimely battle damage to the Grey Shrike's thrusters had robbed her of her part in the final cleanup operation. That had left the Vigilant and Springhawk to gather those last bits of glory. Now she'd been taken out of the final, climactic battle against the remnants of General Yve's forces in order to play messenger. Senior Captain? Lakinda shifted her eyes away from the hypnotic swirl. Her first officer, Mid-Captain Shaprostraub, was standing beside her command chair, an uncertain expression on his face. "What is it?" "I have the follow-up report on the thruster repairs, ma'am," Apros said, offering his questies. "Did you want to look at it now or wait until later?" "Now is good," she said, taking the questies and skimming the report. The thrusters were still not up to full strength, but they were solidly functional. "They've made good progress," she continued. "Relay my compliments and have them keep at it." "Yes, ma'am." Apros hesitated. "Ma'am? Something else, Mid-Captain?" "I was wondering if you could enlighten me as to what the Springhawk is doing way over in the Rapak system." "I assume it's because of the Nikardan presence Thrawn reported after his first incursion there," Lakinda said. "Apparently, Rapak is included in the region our force was tasked to clear out." "That would be reasonable," Apros agreed, a slight frown creasing his forehead. "I'm mostly wondering why Aralani would send the Springhawk out there alone." "Thrawn went toe-to-toe with them once before," Lakinda reminded him. "Even brought back one of their smaller warships for us to study, which we all appreciated when we tangled with them over Premia," Apros said. "My point is that the Vigilant's now about to go in alone against that final Nikardan listening post. This just seems unwise." "Perhaps," Lakinda said. "Or perhaps the admirals decided that a single Chiss warship is enough to take on a group of desperate and badly organized Nikardan." "That wasn't the case at that last base," Apros pointed out darkly. "It took all three of us there to finish them off." "I suppose we'll just have to see," Lakinda said, keeping her voice neutral as she handed back the questies. "The Springhawk and Vigilant are excellent ships, with superb officers and warriors. Whatever Aralani and Thrawn run into, I'm sure they'll be able to handle it." "I hope so," Apros offered a small smile. "It would be embarrassing to have beaten Yve's main force at Crimea only to get kicked in the teeth by his dregs." "Never happen," Lakinda said firmly. "Carry on, Mid-Captain." Apros nodded and headed back to his station. Lakinda had run through the battle over and over again in her mind. She'd examined it from every angle, looked at every possibility, and had come to the unshakable conclusion that her heavy cruiser, all by itself, could have and would have defeated the enemy. It had been faster and easier with the Vigilant and Springhawk, true, but the fact remained that she and the Grey Shrike could have done it alone. But Aralani had never even considered that approach. Instead, she'd taken in all three ships, and as a result, the glory of the victory had been diffused and diminished. Worse, that single unlucky hit on the Grey Shrike's main thrusters had left her and the Sodlak family with even less than their proper third of the honor. It wasn't due to any ulterior motives on Aralani's part. Of that, Lakinda had no doubt. It was inconceivable that a flag officer would have deliberately skewed the battle results that way. Aralani had no family honor to satisfy, no family alliances to defend, no family ambitions to promote. She had nothing to gain by siphoning off Sodlak honor to herself. Thrawn, though, was a different story. Often connections among Chiss families were obscure and tangled. Not here. In this case, the lines of influence and motive were painfully clear. 50 years ago, when the Sodlak had been one of the 10 ruling families, their closest ally had been the Arizi family. After the Sodlak were demoted to merely one of the 40, the Arizi had still stood by them, though of course not as closely as they did with the allies who were still among the ruling families. But they were still on the side of the Sodlak, and the Arizi and Thrawn's myth family were bitter rivals. Anything Thrawn could do to keep the Sodlak down would also indirectly hurt the Arizi. What made it more disturbing was the fact that Aralani and Thrawn had a long history together, going all the way back to the Taharim Academy. It was unthinkable that a flag officer would show favoritism toward any one family or group of families. That was the whole idea behind stripping the higher ranks of their family connections. But the undeniable fact remained that Thrawn seemed to get all the assignments that were heavy with potential honor. Unfortunately, there was no way to prove anything improper was going on, at least not yet. She checked the chrono. The Grey Shrike wouldn't need to go all the way to Rapak, of course, but only within range of the ship-to-ship comm. At their current speed, that would be another 20 to 26 hours. She looked across at the navigational station, where the small hands and delicate fingers of their Skywalker, Betna, were visible around the edge of the chair. A few years ago, on one of Lakinda's previous ships, the captain had been able to nudge a little more speed out of their Skywalker by giving her extra helpings of the treats that particular girl had loved. Maybe, at Bettany's next break, Lakinda would see if she was similarly open to such bribery. Bettany, it turned out, was extremely partial to a particular type of dark cheese, a blend that Lakinda herself rather enjoyed. Unfortunately, Lakinda's promises of an extra bar from her private stockpile, while enthusiastically accepted, made no difference in the 7-year-old's navigational proficiency. 29 hours after leaving the Vigilant, 23 after the idea of a bribe had first occurred to Lakinda, the Grey Shrike came out of hyperspace into the center of a magnificent array of cold-edged stars. Like the hyperspace spectacle itself, Lakinda had long since ceased to notice any of that splendor. "Signaling the Springhawk now, Captain," Opros called, peering over the comm officer's shoulder. "Strength at full, directionals 2 degrees off optimum." "Acknowledged," Lakinda said, resisting the impulse to order them to clear those last 2 degrees. The comm's primary focal cone covered a solid 20% of the sky in that direction, putting Rapak well within the tolerances. Behind her, the hatch opened, and she turned to see Betna's caregiver step onto the bridge. "Caregiver Sumret," she greeted the other woman. "I was about to call you. I believe Betna's due for a meal and a sleep period." "Yes, I was just coming to tell you that," Sumret said. "I do hate it when you military types forget about the needs of our Skywalkers." "We appreciate that you're here to remind us," Lakinda said, making sure to filter the sarcasm out of her voice. Which wasn't easy, given that Betna's official schedule actually marked her break time as having started nearly half an hour ago. Granted, the girl had still been navigating the ship in third sight at that time. But if Sumret was really on top of things, she should have arrived on the bridge then. That close to the end of a cycle, she couldn't have ordered Lakinda to stop the ship. But she could at least have stood there giving everyone on the bridge the stink eye until they released Betna into her care. To Lakinda, that delay strongly suggested that Sumret was being just as casual about her duties as some previous caregivers aboard the Grey Shrike had been over the years, and that her current vocal indignation was largely for Betna's benefit, probably designed to give the girl the comfortable impression that her caregiver was looking out for her more than Sumret's behavior actually indicated. Which was also, unfortunately, the way Lakinda herself now had to play it. She'd been on ships where the Skywalker was anxious or overstressed, or could see conflict between her caregiver and the ship's officers, and that never ended well. "Betna?" she called, turning back toward the nav station. The girl peeked anxiously around the back of the chair. Her eyes flicked to Sumret, then back to Lakinda. "Yes, Senior Captain?" "Your caregiver's here," Lakinda told her. "Time for a meal and some rest." Okay, Betna said. She unfastened her restraints and climbed out of the chair. For a moment she staggered, but the pilot, Wikiv, was ready and caught her arm in a steadying grip. Sorry, the girl murmured, sounding embarrassed. It's all right, Wikiv soothed. Still holding the girl's arm, she popped her own restraints and stood up, and together they made their way over to Lakinda and Sumret. Caregiver, Wikiv said. Her voice was steady, Lakinda noted, and as carefully non-judgmental as Lakinda had herself tried to sound a moment ago. Thank you, Sumret said perfunctorily. Gesturing Wikiv back, she stepped forward and took Betna's arm in her own grip. Come along, Betna. Are we going any farther today, Senior Captain? Betna asked as Sumret steered her toward the hatchway. No, we're done for now, Lakinda said. Go get some food and relax. Yes, ma'am, Betna said. She gave Lakinda a tentative smile, and then she and Sumret walked off the bridge together. I really don't think she cares much for her, Wikiv said, gazing back at the closed hatch. Sumret doesn't care for Betna, Lakinda asked. Or the other way around. Wikiv gave a little snort. In my experience, if it goes one way, it usually goes both. So I've noticed, Lakinda conceded. Nice catch, by the way. Does that happen often? Temporary loss of balance? Wikiv shrugged. It's not uncommon, particularly with the younger Skywalkers, those under the age of 10 or 11. They tend to get woozy if they spend more than 5 or 6 hours in a row in third sight. Her lip twitched. That's not a criticism of you, Senior. So 5 or 6 hours, a number that presumably included all the mandated breaks, left younger Skywalkers unsteady. Yet official regulations permitted a Skywalker to run a full 9 hours at a stretch under normal circumstances, and up to 12 in emergencies. 6 hours versus 9. A serious disconnect indeed. Something Lakinda should take up with someone in Supreme Admiral Jafosk's office the next time she was on Scylla. Keep an eye on her, she told Wiki. Make sure she doesn't get overloaded. Yes, ma'am. With a nod, Wikiv headed back to her seat. Lakinda shifted her attention to the comm station. Commander Shrent, she prompted. No response, Captain, Shrent reported. Multiple attempts, all standard frequencies and encryptions. Lakinda gazed out at the stars, weighing the options. She'd assumed that Thrawn would still be at Rapak when the Grey-Shrike got within comm range, but maybe that wasn't the case. If he'd finished up his errand faster than Aralani had assumed, he might already be on his way back to the Ascendancy, or possibly heading to regroup with the Vigilant. If he was going either place, then Lakinda's job was basically over. While the Springhawk was in hyperspace, all communications were cut off, but once it was back in space normal, he would presumably get the Syndicure's message, either directly or from Aralani. But that assumed he'd had clear directives for what to do after Rapak, and more critically, that he'd actually followed those directives. If he'd gone off on some tangent instead, he could be anywhere. Without knowing when he'd left or where he was going, aiming a transmission and coordinating it with the Springhawk's Skywalker's break schedule would be tricky. The Springhawk could just be in the comm shadow on the far side of the planet, Apros reminded her. Unless Thrawn's in an unusually high orbit, it shouldn't be more than an hour before he's back in range. Lakinda tapped gently at her lips. True enough, but she wasn't ready to just sit here doing nothing but sending transmissions into the chaos for the next hour. New signal, non-encrypted, she ordered, keying her mic. Thrawn's report on the Pakosh, she remembered, listed Tarja as one of their preferred trade languages. Rapak government. This is Senior Captain Lakinda aboard the Chiss Expansionary Defense Fleet warship Grey-Shrike, she said in Tarja. I have a message for Senior Captain Thrawn. Is he currently with you and your people? She keyed off the mic. Continuous transmission, both that message and the encrypted one to Thrawn, she ordered Shrent. Yes, ma'am. We don't know if the Pakosh even have long-distance communication. Apros pointed out as he stepped away from Shrent and rejoined her at her command chair. We may have to go all the way to Rapak if we want to talk to them. I know, Lakinda said. The only problem with that was the fact that for the next few hours their Skywalker was on break. Rapak wasn't too far away, but if they had to get there via jump by jump, it was going to take more hours than she wanted to spend. Not to mention the problem that if she picked the wrong moment to enter hyperspace, she and Thrawn could easily run communications tag against each other, but unless she got an answer from someone in the next half hour, she would just have to try it. "Commander Wikiv, run a course plot to Rapak," she ordered. "Jump by jump, best time." "Yes, ma'am," Wikiv said, busying herself with her board. For the wreck, the accented voice came from the bridge speaker, the alien's Tarja noticeably better than Lakinda's. "I am Wingali for Maraksa, with the honor of speaking for the Pakshin governance. How may the Pakosh serve you?" Lakinda exhaled a silent breath as she keyed her mic. Finally, "Greetings, Wingali for Maraksa," she replied. "As my message stated, I'm trying to communicate with Senior Captain Thrawn. Is he still with you?" "Not at the current time," Wingali said. "He and his ship are returning the leader of a refugee group to her world, there to discover whether their civil war has left any of their species still alive." "He's doing what?" Apros muttered under his breath. Lakinda threw him a glance. "Wingali for Maraksa, I don't understand. Senior Captain Thrawn had no orders to travel anywhere except the Rapak system." "It is a humanitarian gesture," Wingali said. "If their world is lost, the Magus is determined that she and all the refugees under her authority shall give up their lives." "Why?" Lakinda asked. "I am not certain," Wingali said. "The reasons are largely unclear to me. Senior Captain Thrawn hopes to ease their minds and thus spare their lives." "I see," Lakinda said, frowning. She hadn't heard of any civil wars out this way, at least among the various nations the Ascendancy got sporadic information from. "Something new? Who are these people? What do they call themselves?" "We do not know." "What do they name their world?" "We do not know." Lakinda keyed off her mic and looked up at Apros. "Comments? Awfully convenient, not giving us anything we can look up," he said, his eyes narrowed in suspicion. "You suppose they caught the Springhawk unprepared and captured or destroyed it? With Thrawn in command?" Lakinda shook her head. "Not likely. If they'd tried, I doubt there'd be much left of their authority structure still able to talk to us." She keyed her mic back on. "Do you have the coordinates for the refugee system? And when exactly did Senior Captain Thrawn depart?" "He left approximately 7 hours ago," Wingali said. "I'm sending you the coordinates the Magis gave us, plus recordings of the interactions between Senior Captain Thrawn and the refugees, as well as some of the interactions between the Senior Captain's people and mine." Lakinda looked over at Shrent, got a nodded confirmation that a transmission was coming through. She pointed at Wikiv's helm board, got another nod. "Did he say how long he'd be staying there?" she asked Wingali. "If he made such a decision, it was not shared with me," Wingali said. "But I believe he was motivated by a desire to prove the planet inhabitable, and the refugees thus worthy of continued life. I do not know how long such proofs would require." Unfortunately, neither did Lakinda. A cursory flyby could be done in hours. A more detailed ground examination could take weeks. "Understood," she said. "One moment." She keyed off again. "Commander Wikiv?" "Got it, ma'am," Wikiv said, peering closely at her displays. "There's definitely a star at those coordinates. We don't have a data list for it, so I don't know if it has any habitable planets. But the star's spectrum is compatible with standard life form parameters." "How far away is it?" "For Thrawn, coming from Rapak, approximately 63 hours via jump by jump," Wikiv said. 15 by Skywalker. She made another adjustment. "Actually, we're currently quite a bit closer than he is. The system's back toward the Nikardan bases we've been clearing out." Lakinda checked the nav display, where Wikiv had now marked the target system. She was right. It was back toward the area where they'd left the Vigilant, though north and a little bit zenith of that position. "For us, approximately 42 hours via jump by jump," Wikiv. That would all but guarantee she could rendezvous with Thrawn and deliver her message without the two ships playing blind man's tag all over the chaos. But in her mind's eye, she could see how tired and stressed Betna had looked as she left the bridge. She keyed the mic. "What password did Senior Captain Thrawn give you to confirm you were speaking for him?" "A password?" Wingali echoed, his smooth speech pattern faltering. "I was given no password. Unless he spoke one and I did not recognize its true meaning. I have sent you the recordings. Perhaps you will find it in there." "Perhaps," Lakinda said. "Very well. We'll seek him at the refugee's location. If he returns prematurely, please inform him we're looking for him. Even better, give him the recording you're certainly making of this conversation." I will do both, Wingali promised. A safe and profitable voyage to you, Senior Captain Lakinda. Thank you. Grayshrike out. Lakinda keyed off the mic. Helm, get us moving, jump by jump, best speed. Yes, ma'am, Wikiev said, and busied herself with her board. Depending on how thorough Thrawn decides to be, Apros said, a jump by jump may well get us there after he's already left. Again, I remind the captain that emergency regulations likely apply here. 1. Thrawn's not going to run his Skywalker all 16 of those hours, Lakinda said. Not for something like this. He'll give her time to rest, which means he won't be getting there ahead of Wikivev's projected schedule. Even if it means he arrives very late back at the Vigilant to complete the Council's mandated task, Thrawn's extremely good at arguing from points of weakness and even marginal insubordination, Lakinda said sourly, especially when it resulted in better standing for his family and worse standing for everyone else. 2. You saw how tired Bettany is. We'll start jump by jump and bring her in after she's had her full rest period. Understood, Apris said. He was still unhappy with the decision, Lakinda could tell, especially since there were members of the aristocra who would have no qualms at all about slapping the Grayshrike's own delays onto its captains and senior officers' shoulders. But he knew better than to keep pushing once Lakinda's mind was made up. May I ask what that bit was about a password? He asked. I didn't know we had passwords for situations like this. As far as I know, we don't, Lakinda agreed. I threw that in mostly to see how he would react to the question. Did he pass the test? I'm not sure I know, Lakinda admitted. He's alien, and I don't know any of his verbal parameters. She checked her chrono. Her bridge watch had been over for half an hour. I'll be in my quarters if you need me, she said, standing up. Make sure Junior Captain Ovanon is fully apprised of the situation when you turn the watch over to him. I'll want him to switch over from jump by jump as soon as Bettina's ready to return to duty. Yes, ma'am, Apros said. Sleep well, Captain. She would sleep. All right, Lakinda thought as she left the bridge and headed down the corridor. But how fast she got there, and how deep that sleep turned out to be, would depend largely on whether or not she could figure out how exactly Thrawn intended to use all this to his advantage, and just where and how badly his family's success would hurt her own. The wind whistled across Thurfian's face and hair, rustling the knee-high grass he and his Evros guide were standing in, and sending a mist of loose soil off the edge of the cliff 2 meters in front of them. There, Evros Putiter said. Staying well, but Thurfian had wanted to see things from the Sodlak side of the issue, so here they were. And now, with the breeze and the subtle odors of the farm, forest, and river swirling around him, one conclusion rose uppermost in his mind. He really needed to get out of his underground Shilla office more often. You can see the problem, Isputi continued. The seeds from the forest below us were blown across the river to our farmland, where they started a new forest. All of which began, 20 years ago? Thurfian asked. Closer to 30, Osputi conceded. At first, you see, the trees were sparse and not a concern to the farmers. Then, as they grew, they provided homes for the blinkbirds that controlled the field's vermin population. But now you can see what it's like. Yes, Thurfian said, his earlier amusement fading back into the underlying seriousness of the situation. The forest canopy had grown too thick for ground crops to thrive beneath it, and as the forest slowly spread outward, more and more arable ground was being lost. And you can't just cut down the trees. The Sodlak forbid it, Isputi said with a sigh. They claim the trees are a specific hybrid they own title to, and that no one can harvest them without permission. And of course, the license the local Sodlak Patriol was offering the farmers was expensive enough to suck all the profit out of any logging they might do. Typical Sodlak self-centered worldview. What exactly do you want me to do? He asked. To be honest, I'm not sure there's anything you can do, Osputi admitted. The Sodlak are of the 40 great families. The Evros are, he sighed again, of nothing. You're a family and a people of the Chiss Ascendancy, Thurfian said firmly. As such, you're owed justice. Justice that should have come via the Arizi, Thurfian added sourly to himself. The Sodlak were their allies, and they should have been the ones to step in and handle this negotiation. But the Arizi were apparently too preoccupied with yet another attempt to court the Chaff family into a full alliance to be bothered with anything this small and petty. He frowned, leaning a little closer to the edge. Were those purple flowers he was glimpsing through the trees of the main forest? "Careful," Osputi said nervously. "These cliffs can be treacherous." "I'm all right," Thurfian said, shifting his gaze back across the river to the Evros farmland. Those fields were dotted with the same purple. "All right." "Tell me, Osputi, do the winds here shift direction during the year?" "Yes, quite dramatically, in fact," Osputi said. "In winter they come from the south, while in summer they come from the north. So winter is when the Zodlak seeds ride the winds across the river to your land." Thurfian pointed downward. "And summer, then, is when your seeds go the other direction." Carefully, Osputi eased a few centimeters forward. "Why, yes," he said, sounding puzzled. "I never noticed that before." He took a long step back. "But as I've already said, the grain down there will be of poor quality." "I'm not concerned about the quality," Thurfian said. "I'm pointing out that your crops are on Zodlak land." He smiled tightly. "And if you can't harvest or damage their trees without permission, neither can they harvest or damage your crops." "But they aren't harvesting any of—" "Or damage them," Thurfian interrupted, leaning on the words. For a long minute, Osputi stared at the forest. Thurfian waited, again savoring the feel of the wind in his hair. "But our crops aren't a protected hybrid," the other said at last. "Doesn't matter," Thurfian said. "The point is that both families have a claim against the other. More to the point is that the Zodlak have a lot more to lose from any cross-compensation decision that might be rendered. That threat alone should be enough to bring them to negotiation. Syndic Thurfian, if you could give us even that much hope, the Evros will forever be in your debt." "I think I can give you more than just hope," Thurfian said, taking his arm and leading him away from the cliff edge and back toward their skycar. "Let's head back to your hearing chamber and give the Zodlak Patriel a call. I think there's a good chance we can get this resolved by dinner time." For once, Thurfian was wrong. It actually took them until nearly